At the age of 3, Lou Ferrigno lost 80% of his hearing. Children broke his hearing aids and called him Deaf Louie. When he cried about bullies at home, his father struck him. He used parts from the junkyard to build muscles, so he would never feel weak again. But new agony came with triumph. He had to endure skin-burning Hulk makeup procedures for 5 years. He prevented his daughter from being crushed by tearing his bicep. His wife of 43 years, who is now 71, left him, saying he scared her with his hulking girth. Lou Ferrigno's tragedy is incredibly tragic. Despite being born in 1951, Lou Ferrigno had a difficult start in life after birth. He experienced severe ear infections as a toddler, not the kind that clear up in a week, but the kind that cause irreversible harm. He had lost between 75 and 80% of his hearing by the time he reached 3. The frightening part though, until then, nobody even knew. Only when they clapped their hands behind him and had no response, did his parents realize something was amiss. Due to this delay, he was largely silent during his early years, and no one was aware that he was deaf. He was supplied with hearing aids once the physicians eventually sorted it out. However, this was in the 1950s. They were not small or inconspicuous. They were large, ungainly boxes with wires hanging from them that were attached to his chest. Lou detested the way they presented him. At one point, he claimed to feel like a Martian freak. He was able to hear slightly better, but not much better, thanks to these gadgets. Additionally, his speech was already odd since he lost so much early language development. People took notice, and the school children weren't kind to him. They referred to him as Deaf Mute and Deaf Louie. They made fun of his speech patterns. He was unable to defend himself when they struck him in the chest to shatter his hearing aids. He was slow, thin, and little. Because he frequently felt alone, he turned to comic books as an escape. He read about characters with latent power that didn't fit in, like Superman, Spider-Man, and most notably the Hulk. He got something from those stories that education never offered him. Life wasn't any easier at home. Matthew Ferrigno, his father, was a hard-charging Brooklyn police officer who didn't think excuses were acceptable. Lou was not consoled by his father when he returned home in tears from bullying. He struck him. "If you can't fight your own battles, don't come home," he said. Lou's father shut the basement gym after his grades suffered due to his inability to lip read from the back of the classroom, and promised to keep it sealed until he raised his grades. Subsequently stated that I wasn't flawless, which is why my father rejected me. However, that rejection stoked a fire within him rather than shattering it. He aspired to be so resilient that he would never be harmed again. Thus Lou adjusted. He learned to read lips like a hawk while sitting in the front row of every session. A teacher was lost if he looked away from writing on the board, but he persisted. He occasionally kept his deafness a secret from his professors. He felt too embarrassed. However, he observed, watched, made assumptions, and deduced information from people's body language and faces. He used guts and sheer focus to get through school, even if it was hard. When Lou was 13 years old in 1964, everything changed. He noticed the movie Hercules while he was watching TV. Lou compared the performance of Steve Reeves in the title role to that of a real-life superhero. Reeves had more than simply strength. He resembled Lou's favorite comic book characters. Lou knew exactly what he wanted at that moment. He was interested in more than just reading about strength. In particular, he aspired to be the Hulk. He once referred to the Hulk as the Green Santa Claus, a strong yet compassionate figure. That was what Lou aspired to be. He aspired to be resilient enough to avoid bullying in the future. However, gyms were costly, and his family couldn't afford them. He so created his own weights. He discovered several old cans at the junkyard when he was just 13 years old, filled them with cement, and affixed them to a broomstick. His first barbell was that one. He made a bench by nailing 2 large wooden boxes together, adding hinges, and even placing a pillow on top to ease the discomfort. "My back hurt," he remarked. However, I made an effort to mimic everything I saw in the mags. For years, he continued to train in this manner. He eventually joined R&J Health Club, a legitimate gym, when he was 17. But by then, he had used just scrap metal and willpower to construct a sturdy body. Nevertheless, bodybuilding was not a source of income. At the age of 17, Lou secured employment at a tough Brooklyn sheet metal mill in 1969. At the time, it paid $10 per hour, which is equivalent to $75 now. But there were machines that could tear off fingers, it was noisy, and it was dangerous. It was a nightmare for someone who was almost deaf. However, Lou continued to work since he needed the money for supplements and food. He packed tuna, cottage cheese and boiled eggs to fuel his exercises while others ate sandwiches. Then, everything changed one day in 1972. Near Lou, a co-worker had his hand crushed by a hydraulic press. That was the last straw. After leaving, he never returned. Lou took a chance, and it paid off, even if bodybuilding and job security were not guaranteed. Lou Ferrigno stunned the world in 1973 at the age of just 21. He was crowned Mr. Universe and Mr. America. That had never been done by anyone his age. He weighed about 285 pounds and was 6 feet 5 inches tall. When compared to other bodybuilders, he appeared enormous, but his survival made his ascent much more potent. Lou had an ear infection as a toddler that caused him to lose most of his hearing. He was bullied by children. He began lifting weights to feel less alone as well as to get stronger. He committed the unimaginable once more a year later. It was his second time winning Mr. Universe. He joined Mr. Olympia in 1975. Even though he didn't win, his third-place finish elevated him to the elite of the sport. Everything changed that year. Filming on the documentary Pumping Iron started. It came after Lou and Arnold Schwarzenegger's rivalry. Lou was the size. Even though he weighed about 50 pounds more than Arnold, Arnold had an advantage. He tricked people. Before the tournament, he asked Lou and his parents to breakfast. "Lou just needs one more month to be ready," Arnold said with a smile over coffee and eggs. Then, as if he had already won, he boasted that he was a 6-time champion. Although Arnold's strategies were successful, Lou later referred to him as conceited. Lou came in third. Arnold won his 6th championship. Lou was broke despite winning 2 Mr. Universe titles. Bodybuilding was not profitable. Lou earned $10 an hour working in a metal shop in Brooklyn for 3 years. He was forced to stop competing by 1975. Even though he was in top physical condition, prize money was insufficient to cover his expenses. Lou wed Carla Green in 1980. He had saved barely $5,000. Carla had $7,000. That was it. "We built our home and our money from nothing," she once remarked. At the time, Lou's size was unprecedented. His arms were larger than Arnold's, measuring 23.5 inches. He was capable of deadlifting 900 pounds, but no one ever verified it. Nevertheless, both his stature and strength were genuine. Tall bodybuilders typically had a gaunt appearance. Lou didn't. Despite his size, he was balanced, and it was before the age of steroids. His muscles were developed by hard work, self-control and a desire to fit in. Lou stunned audiences once more in 1975, when he was barely 24. He left bodybuilding behind. He was unhurt, no one beat him. He simply could not afford to continue. The majority of contests only paid $1,000. Everything altered once more in 1977. To portray the Green Beast, the Incredible Hulk's creators required a huge actor. Initially they summoned Arnold Schwarzenegger. At 6 feet 1 inch, he was all muscle. However, they claimed he was too short. Richard Kiel, the 7 foot 2 inch actor who portrayed Jaws in the James Bond films, was the next person they tried. They even started working with him on the film. Then, however, an odd event occurred. Kiel in costume caught the attention of the director's little son during his visit to the set. Suddenly, he told his father, "That's not the Hulk." Everything was different. They resumed their search, this time for someone who resembled the comic book Hulk. Big, torn and frightening, Lou Ferrigno was busy preparing for the 1977 Mr. Olympia at the same time. Suddenly, he received an audition call. When he appeared, they told him to just be like the Hulk and painted him green. Lou claimed that they immediately hired him after he snarled and acted like a beast while standing in front of the camera. To accept the assignment, he forfeited his chance at the Olympia. His entire life was altered by just one choice. However, the actual task had not yet begun. Makeup took about 4 hours at the start of each filming day. It was more than paint. The green pancake makeup was thick, chalky and adhered to everything. A total of 6 layers were applied. Next followed the custom-made teeth, nose and forehead. The worst thing, the white lenses. Because they ached so badly, he was only able to wear them for 15 minutes at a time. Lou spent 20 hours in full Hulk makeup during the pilot episode. Yes, 20. He had to have a special shower installed in his trailer, only to remove the paint since it was that severe. The green wouldn't go away even then. He had green toenails for 6 months. The toll on the body was severe. Lou once tore a muscle during a scene in 1978 where the Hulk lifted a car. Additionally, he suffered chemical burns from the green makeup, particularly on hot days when the shoot took place outside. The weight changes were also insane in temperatures above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. He had to quickly bulk up for some sequences and then lose weight for interviews. It was risky, according to his dietitian. He required care in between seasons since his skin broke out from the prosthesis. In 1981, he told People magazine that despite only being 30, his body had aged to 42 due to stress, chemicals and sleep deprivation. Lou nevertheless exerted more effort than anyone else. He performed 95% of the feats himself. He didn't care that it violated CBS's safety regulations. He felt that he was the only stuntman who could play the part of the Hulk. He once injured his back after running through an improperly constructed false wall, but he continued to record. Another scene required the Hulk to use cables to flip a car at 4 in the morning. The apparatus malfunctioned. Lou was splattered in green paint, exhausted, and furious. "You think I'm not going to turn that car over?" he yelled. Then he flipped the car himself with sheer muscle. "I think I really turned into the Hulk that night," he added. He is still in discomfort from the back issue. He will, however, tell you that he has no regrets if you ask him if it was worthwhile. His hearing made things even more difficult. Due to ear infections, Lou lost the majority of his hearing at the age of 3. On set he had to follow instructions by reading lips. That was great for tranquil scenes, but it was a disaster for action shots. Directors had to guess when a scene ended because they couldn't call cut. His hearing aids occasionally broke in the middle of a shot, and he failed to notice crucial safety signals. In order to stay alert, he eventually wore 2 at once. Nevertheless, he continued. The fact that the Hulk's roars and growls weren't always his was unknown to many fans. The voice was initially provided by Ted Cassidy Lurch from the Addams Family. Charles Napier took over following Cassidy's death in 1979. Decades later, Lou was no longer the designated voice. Finally, Lou's voice was used in the 2012 film for the Avengers. His cries and growls mingled with those of Mark Ruffalo. And once more in 2015's Age of Ultron. Lou Ferrigno's voice has thus been a part of the Hulk for 37 years, which was the longest of any member. However, being famous wasn't simple. It was the Hulk, not Lou, that fans adored. They would approach him with big eyes and excitement, but they would never address him by name. The man underneath the paint was invisible to them. He became weary of that. It felt weird, he once remarked, to be acknowledged for a persona he couldn't even articulate. Since reading comic novels as a child, he had envisioned himself as a hero. He was now one, but no one was aware of his true identity. He was alone, even on stage. The hot, thick makeup was applied. In order to prevent overheating, he had to remain in an air-conditioned trailer in between takes. In other words, Bixby sat alone, perspiring and waiting as the team laughed and bonded. Always on the outside and misinterpreted, it reflected the Hulk's inner loneliness. Lou Ferrigno was prepared to pursue his goal in 1983. It was his chance to portray the renowned strongman, who he had always admired, Steve Reeves, the real Hercules. Hercules was the title of the film. However, it wasn't like anything from antiquity. It was jam-packed with robots, lasers, and crazy sci-fi effects from the 1980s. Ferrigno claimed to be in the finest shape of his life, and to have trained harder than ever. He had huge muscles. They appeared as though they may burst, according to others. However, there was a strange feeling when the film debuted in theaters on August 26. It wasn't Ferrigno's voice. His entire speech had been dubbed by another man, Mark Smith, but he didn't think that was sufficient justification to take away his voice. He later remarked that it was unfortunate since that would have elevated it to the status of a classic. Seeing his lifelong competitor, Arnold Schwarzenegger, endure the same dubbing in Hercules in New York years prior was much more painful. However, Lou's career stagnated while Arnold's took off. After the movie's failure, Ferrigno was referred to as a one-note performer in Hollywood. It was considerably worse behind the scenes. Lou wed Carla Green in 1980. Their combined assets were only $12,000. Lou had $5,000 and Carla had $7,000. For someone who had just portrayed the Hulk in a popular television series from 1977 to 1982, it was surprising. However, celebrity did not equate to wealth. Lou made $10 an hour working in a sheet metal plant in Brooklyn before he became famous. The task was cruel. A man lost his hand in a machine one day. That following week, Lou resigned. The money quickly dried up after the conclusion of the Hulk show. Carla took over. She took over as his manager, scheduled his appearances, and traveled with him to start over. Later, she remarked, "We built our home and our money from nothing." They reached a breaking point in 1991. Lou was promised $500,000 a year, or around $875,000 today, by wrestling mogul Vince McMahon to join his new World Bodybuilding Federation. Lou replied no, but it was clear how terrible things had gotten since he nearly said yes. Ferrigno made an attempt to resume bodybuilding that same year. His most recent competition was 17 years ago. He received the largest offer ever issued to a bodybuilder from McMahon, $500,000 a year. That was better than anything Arnold had ever produced. There was a catch though. For 3 months in a row, McMahon insisted that all athletes pass drug tests. Lou was not fond of that notion. Conversely, legendary bodybuilder Joe Weider handed Lou $250,000 in cash and $250,000 in advertisements for his range of sportswear. Lou went for a wider option. He took the stage at Mr. Olympia in 1992. His age was 41. He finished in 12th place. It was more than respectable after all those years away. It was a resurgence. However, Ferrigno's most impactful moment did not occur on stage or TV. It took place at home in 2020. Shanna, his daughter, was playing close to his truck when an air compressor weighing 1,000 pounds overturned. Lou sprang forward and seized the machine in an instant. Would see ply, in a plug. He tore his biceps clean off the bone, yet he prevented it from crushing her. He claimed that it sounded like a shirt tearing. His arm appeared to be a child's as he looked down. His armpit was where the muscle had coiled up. It was among the most severe injuries a bodybuilder could sustain. He was devastated. The stakes were high for his career. However, Bubba Smith, an NFL player, sent him to a surgeon. Ferrigno had surgery the following day. 6 agonizing months later, he returned. He was able to deadlift 600 pounds once more. Not only was he strong, he was a father who would stop at nothing to keep his child safe, including tearing his own body to pieces. Something weird occurred in Hollywood during the beginning of the 1990s. Michael Jackson secretly hired Lou Ferrigno, the enormous Green Hulk from television, as his personal trainer. Nobody anticipated it. It began when Jackson's surgeon stated that Ferrigno was the only one who could assist, and it wasn't a fitness stunt or a picture opportunity. Lou came to Jackson because he was unable to train in public. He went to Jackson's house 3 or 4 times a week, but lifting weights wasn't the point of this. It dealt with back problems, flexibility, pain management, stretching, and light treadmill exercises. Meticulously planned routines and balanced balls to keep Jackson moving on stage without collapsing. Jackson, however, followed a strict vegetarian diet and occasionally skipped meals in order to prepare for major performances. Something more profound developed throughout the years. They discussed their early years. Their fathers were severe. They were both pushed hard. On television, one was the strongest man. The other was the world's most well-known performer. In the private gym, Jackson once showed Ferrigno how to moonwalk. It felt stratospheric, Lou remarked. Jackson would become a kid again after working out, playing hide-and-seek with his kids. The king of pop was reduced to Mr. Mom, and Ferrigno watched. However, Ferrigno's life was not limited to Hollywood. He startled everyone once more when he was 53 years old and in his 50s. This time he dressed as a real police officer and put on a different type of outfit. Nor a stunt, nor a TV part. He completed first aid training, passed background checks, trained and obtained his guns qualification. In Los Angeles County, he was appointed a reserve deputy sheriff. It wasn't merely honorary, either. He was serious about it. His father had served in the NYPD as a lieutenant. Thus, this felt intimate. Lou eventually served in San Luis Obispo as well. Next is Irving, Texas. He had worn the badge in 3 separate locations by 2018. He said that his notoriety did not grant him any favors. He deserved everything he did. Even though most people only knew Lou as the Hulk, comedy introduced him to a whole new audience. He played himself in 20 episodes of The King of Queens between 2000 and 2007, but not as a superhero. This Lou was funnier and softer, mocking his own celebrity, making jokes with Kevin James, and enjoying the laughter he receives from live audiences. He claimed that he could relate to the show because I experienced similar things in my daily life. For a completely different reason, fans who had not grown up with the Incredible Hulk began to like him. Now, the intimidating strong man was just a hilarious, large neighbor. Reality TV followed. Ferrigno became a member of the Celebrity Apprentice in 2012. Things became chaotic at that point. There were fights. There was a lot of tension. On screen, a single instant exploded. Lou and another competitor were deemed useless by comedian Lisa Lampanelli, who said that they only had 5 brain cells between them. Lou lost his temper during a heated boardroom confrontation. "I'm glad Lisa isn't a man because I would throw her through that window if she were," he stated. Things worsened. Later, on live television, he asserted that her brain was impacted by her lack of fitness. Nevertheless, his team managed to raise $50,000 for the Muscular Dystrophy Association, despite all the commotion. In a viral video, he even danced while mopping. In episode 9, he was sacked after 8 episodes. Things at home took a bad turn just 3 years later. Lou filed 2 lawsuits against his own brother in 2015. Andrew Ferrigno Workout Equipment was the name of his brother Andrew's company, declared that to be unfair. It had nothing to do with him, but it did use their last name. A disclaimer was requested in the initial litigation. Andrew was urged to stop using the word exercise by the second person. Lou's estimated net worth at the time was $12 million. Andrew was enraged. "Why must he suck me dry?" he asked TMZ. "I'm completely confused." Eventually Andrew gave in. The company was renamed Andrew Ferrigno Equipment by him. The original Hulk from the 1970s television series is Lou Ferrigno's most well-known role, but his voice also appeared in the current Marvel films. Ferrigno was the one yelling and growling behind the scenes in The Incredible Hulk 2008. Additionally, it wasn't just Mark Ruffalo, who criticized Loki and labeled him a pinch god in The Avengers in 2012. Marvel's sound effects, Ruffalo's tone, and Ferrigno's voice all merged into one. That continued until 2015's Age of Ultron. However, Marvel discontinued utilizing Ferrigno after the Hulk began speaking more like a human in Thor: Ragnarok. It wasn't something he took lightly. He thought the role was becoming too distant from the ferocious animal he used to play. Ferrigno was concealing a struggle that no one could see off-screen. He suffered a severe ear infection at the age of 3, which caused him to lose 85% of his hearing. He got hearing aids by the age of 4, but they were never very effective. His inability to hear his own voice influenced his speech pattern for the rest of his life. His accent was perceived as odd. He gave them credence. He claimed to have a speech impairment. The reality hurt more. He was unable to adequately enunciate words due to his poor hearing. His hearing continued to deteriorate. His word recognition had fallen to just 18% by the time he was in his late 60s. Nevertheless, he was opposed to having a cochlear implant. He was afraid, until a friend received one and saw an increase in word recognition from 12% to 98%. Everything altered as a result. Ferrigno eventually underwent the procedure in February 2021, when he was 69 years old. The implant conveyed signals directly to his brain, not just amplifying noises. His word recognition increased from 18% to 65% after 6 weeks. He could hear his grandchildren sobbing upstairs, the ticking of appliances, the distant sound of a motor engine, and voices coming from across the room. He referred to the event as rebirth. He was able to hear things that most people take for granted for the first time in his life. He claimed that he had never had this clarity from hearing aids. He now advises people not to wait as long as he did. However, everyone was surprised by what happened next. After 43 years of marriage, his 74-year-old wife Carla filed for divorce in October 2023. Lou was accused of isolating and dominating her. According to court documents, he limited her freedom of movement within the house, restricting her to 2 rooms only. Despite her dementia diagnosis, she said he refused to make the house safer for her. She added that he subjugated her by using his size and strength. According to her attorneys, Lou's actions were a part of a Machiavellian plot to keep their $2.9 million California mansion and keep her in the marriage. Lou refuted the accusations and stated that her health was his top priority. Then things deteriorated in early 2025. Lou, who is now 71, sued his sister-in-law and his own daughter, Shanna, 42. They were accused of elder abuse by him. They allegedly drove Carla to a bank in March in an attempt to take $500,000 out of her account, despite the fact that Carla had been declared mentally incapable of handling her money. The bank called Lou and halted the transaction. He claimed that Shanna was undermining the caretakers he had recruited, turning Carla against him, and turning off cameras.